In this video, I'll be performing a post-purchase inspection on a Porsche 944 and assessing its overall condition inside and out. This is a 1987 Porsche 944S in a beautiful Malvern red paint with a black interior. Malvern red is a rare color option. It was only available for one production year, and it presents with a much deeper and darker coloring than the traditional Guards red or India red often seen on 944s. The owner of this car purchased it in New Jersey and shipped it down for some maintenance and repair work, which will include the post-purchase inspection or PPI. So if you're in the market for a 944 or have recently purchased one, you should get a good idea of some things to look for, as we'll be assessing the exterior condition of the body, paint, glass, and weather seals. We'll also be checking the lighting around the car and performing a cold start to check the idle condition, the oil pressure, and any warning lights on the dash. Then we'll perform a compression test on the engine, check the fluid levels, and inspect all the rubber components in the engine compartment. As for the interior, we'll have a look at the leather seats, the carpeting, the dashboard, and test the functionality of various features. Finally, we'll take the car out on a road test to evaluate its performance and listen for any strange noises. So let's get started. As we walk around the exterior, we're looking for any major damage or signs of prior accidents or paint repairs. Most of the panels here are pretty clean and the body lines are in good shape. I'm seeing a few small chips in the right front fender, the right door panel, and the left rear quarter panel. There's a minor dent on top of the right front fender and one in the lower right rear panel, along with some scratches on the left front fender and the lower right rear quarter. But outside of that, I'm not seeing any significant signs of accident damage. As for the panel alignment, you'll notice that most of the panel gaps are pretty wide on the 944 in general, much more so than modern cars, but the main thing to look for is any inconsistencies in the gaps from end to end. The panels should be straight and flush with each other, especially around the front end where the nose panel and the headlight covers align with the hood. The pop-up headlight assemblies can be adjusted up and down at the pivot points as well as side to side, so when there's been a prior repair, you'll often find that they're not entirely flush with the hood or the nose panel, or that they're slightly turned to the left or right, creating an inconsistent panel gap, but everything here is pretty well lined up. Another thing to look out for is when there's an impact to the lower front valance, it'll pull at the seams along the front fenders and bend or break the mounting tabs along those leading edges, and these ones are nice and straight, which is a good sign. Taking a closer look at the paint surfaces, I'm seeing some color fading on the flat panels, where the hood and the roof panels are a little oxidized and showing some imperfections. The upper section of the right rear quarter is also fading, and there's evidence of a blend line where it appears to have been repainted. When you're looking at the rear quarters on a 944, you can usually check the two bolts on either side. You'll find them just inside the seam for the upper hatch glass. These were installed after paintwork during production, so they should either be black or a faded metallic color. You'll notice these ones have been painted over in body color, which is further evidence of a respray. We can also see on the other side, these ones have slightly less coloring, but a significant amount of clear coat on the outer section, so we know that a two-stage paint was used, where the Malvern red would have been a single-stage paint from the factory. You can also check for sharp tape lines, runs in the paint, or overspray on the weather seals and trim pieces. Here we can see a little bit of overspray on the left quarter window seal and inside the rear wheel arches. Moving around the back, you'll notice that the license plate lights have been oversprayed as well, indicating the rear panel has been repainted along with the quarters. Moving back up front, we can also see some color shade differences along the front fenders, where the leading sections are a bit darker and there appears to be a blend line in the center of each panel. I'm also seeing a few brush touch-ups along the headlight covers, the aluminum front bumper, and the side roof trim pieces. So let's go ahead and take some paint meter readings with a thickness gauge and see what else we can find out. When you're taking paint thickness measurements on a 944, the factory paint will typically read around 4 to 7 mils for most panels. There are a few areas like the door jambs that will measure a little thinner, and the metallic paints can sometimes present a little thicker in the area of 8 to 9 mils, but anything over 10 mils would point towards an aftermarket repaint in most cases. I generally take 3 to 4 measurements at different spots on each panel to check for variations. In this case, I found the hood and nose panel readings to fall within the range of 4 to 5 mils, which would indicate factory paint. The aluminum front bumper and rear bumper usually measure a little lower in the area of 4 to 6 mils, and here the front bumper is showing above 7 mils, so this was likely repainted. As for the front fenders, we should see pretty consistent readings across each panel, but these are measuring around 5 mils at the rear of the fender and above 8 mils at the front sections. Again, we had that visible color delineation at the center of these panels, so this provides confirmation that the fronts were repainted. The 944 sunroof panels are made of fiberglass, so we won't get any readings there, but the surrounding roof panel can be measured, and these are showing within the normal range of 5 to 6 mils. Moving down the door panels, we can see that the left door is measuring at 9 to 11 mils, and the right door is measuring at 4 to 5 mils, indicating that the left door panel has been repainted. The left rear quarter is measuring anywhere between 9 and 15 mils in various places, and the right rear quarter between 7 and 9 mils, again confirming the paintwork we noticed back here. Finally, the rear panel is showing 10 to 11 mils in most places, so a clear repaint here, as these are usually between 3 and 6 mils, and the rear bumper is coming back around 4 to 5 mils, which would be within factory range. Taken as a whole, we can certainly say that the paintwork isn't all original on this car, but it's in pretty good condition overall, and some of the faded areas could be rejuvenated with some polishing efforts, which would add some uniformity across the panels. Since we're on the outside of the car here, we'll move on to a few other items of note. 944s generally hold up pretty well against rust, but you can sometimes see it along the lower sills and fender areas. These sills look pretty clean on both sides, but there's one small rust spot starting on the lower rear section of the right front fender. Taking a look at the stone guards around the car, the ones on the right side have been replaced with aftermarket vinyl that someone has cut manually. You can see some jagged edges around the corners where the OEM ones would be rounded. The left side appears to have the original OEM stone guards installed, but they're a little cracked and the body shop decided to paint right over them. You can see the clear coat has created a smooth transition around the edges, and there's a sharp tape line along the bottom. Looking around at the weather seals and the trim pieces, the front and rear bumper pads are in nice condition, and the window seals are still fairly soft. I'm not seeing any cracking or deterioration, which is good. The urethane rear spoiler is also in really nice shape. It's quite soft and flexible with no signs of aging. When checking for OEM glass around the car, you'll want to look for the Secure-It stamp on each piece of glass. Sometimes you'll find aftermarket branding on the windshield, which would indicate a prior replacement, but these ones all check out. The lower windshield is showing just a little bit of delamination around the lower corners where the glass is separating from the adhesive, but it still appears to be water resistant. The front glass is otherwise pretty clean with no chips or cracks to mention. The rear hatch glass is also in good shape. There's some early signs of delamination in the upper right corner, but it's not too bad. It's fairly common for the rear glass to pull away from the metal frame over time, which will create leaks, so you want to look for a nice uniform adhesive coloring along the upper span. Any areas where it appears to be broken up between black and clear would indicate separation. As for the wheels and tires, the car has a staggered set of 17-inch Cup 2 wheels installed by the prior owner, and I'm not seeing any curb rash or major damage, just some light scratches here and there. The tire date codes on the front are showing 2016 and 2019, and both the rears are showing 2018, so while the tread depth is okay, they've aged beyond 6 years and should be replaced. Finally, the windshield wipers at the front and rear are worn and should be replaced as well. As for the lighting around the car, both the high and low beams are functional, as well as the fog lights with no cracks in the lenses. The front and rear side markers are good on both sides. The turn signals are working as expected. The reverse lights and all 3 brake lights are good as well. Any problems here are pretty easy to care for in most cases, although there can be issues with the headlight wiring breaking down, and the fog light lenses are fairly expensive to replace. At cold start, the cranking speed is normal and the engine fires right up. The idle does stumble a bit for about 2 to 3 minutes until the engine is warmed up. When the engine is revved during this time, the idle fails to settle back in and the engine stalls, but once it's warmed up, it runs fine. This would point to things like vacuum leaks, the idle air control valve, the DME temperature sensor, or the throttle position switch. So we'll see if we can check some of those out when we look over the engine. As for the gauges, the oil pressure locks in at 5 bar, which is good to see. It should fall between 4 and 5 bar when cold, and later drop down to between 2 and 3 bar when the engine reaches normal operating temperature. The voltage reading is normal as well, right between 12 and 14 volts. The fuel gauge is showing about half a tank, but the low fuel warning light is on, usually indicating that the fuel level sending unit inside the tank has failed. Once the idle normalizes, I'm not detecting any excessive vibrations that would indicate the engine mounts are collapsed, which is a good sign. Next, we'll perform a compression test on the engine to check for potential head gasket failure or valve sealing issues. First, we'll pull the spark plug leads and remove the spark plugs. We'll also want to remove the DME fuel pump relay so the pump and injectors aren't running while we crank the engine. Next, we'll connect the gauge to a cylinder and crank the engine about 8 times while holding the accelerator at wide open throttle, and repeat the process for all 4 cylinders. Hitting specific PSI values isn't as critical to look for here, but most of the 16-valve engines in the S and S2 cars will fall between 170 and 200 PSI, with the turbo models on the lower end from 120 to 150 PSI, and the naturally aspirated 8-valve engines commonly in the 140 to 160 range. What's more important here is that the return values all fall within about 10% of each other. In this case, we've got PSI readings of 200, 197, 195, and 198 for cylinders 1 through 4, all falling within 2.5%, which is a great sign of health for this engine. The spark plugs are a little carbon foul, but nothing too out of the norm, considering the car's only been used for short trips lately. Taking a closer look at the engine components, most everything here is in pretty good shape for the car's age. There's a little bit of oxidation on some of the metal surfaces, but the magnesium components are really clean. The 16-valve engines received a magnesium valve cover and cam gear cover that are known to degrade over time, and these are presenting a nice original coating with minimal imperfections. Most of the rubber parts are in good shape as well. The ignition cables are flexible with no splits in the rubber coating. The fuel lines appear original with no cracks or leaks. The vacuum hose connections are firmly attached and all the lines are intact. The coolant hoses are smooth and flexible with no signs of leaks, and the accessory belts are a little dry, but they're not currently cracked or fraying. As for the wiring, the loom for the brake pad wear sensors has crumbled off, which is very common to see, but the other harnesses are otherwise good with no cracked boots or exposed wiring. In checking around for broken or missing parts, I can see that the rain cover and the headlight relay boot have some cracks. The hood shocks are pretty weak, but they still support the hood. The intake tube between the air filter housing and the airflow meter is split in half, and the alternator air duct below the car is crushed. The hood insulation pads are also crumbling and falling apart, which is fairly common. I initially noticed that one of the screws for the air filter housing was missing, but later found it wedged down at the base of the cylinder head. The air filter checked out relatively clean, but I did find the remnants of a rodent's nest in the filter housing. While we're in here, I also like to test the battery with the engine off and the alternator with the engine running. where the battery is reading 12.7 volts and the alternator at 14.1 volts, which is great to see. Typical output voltage on the alternator should fall between 13.5 and 14.5 volts, and anything lower than 13 volts will be cause for further diagnosis. I also noticed that the battery tray is showing signs of prior oxidation that's now covered up with some black spray-on bed liner, but I'm not seeing any exposed areas of rust at the moment. Finally, we can check out the various fluids in the engine compartment and assess their general condition. The coolant level is falling just below the minimum fill line, but is otherwise clean in appearance. This could simply be a little evaporation over time, with more serious causes being a head gasket failure or aging oil cooler seals. In this case, we already know the head gasket is good, but we can also check for a large buildup of milky foam under the oil cap and inside the fill tube, which usually points to the oil cooler seals, but everything here looks nice and clean. The brake fluid is filled to the maximum level, but it's a little dark with some particles collecting in the reservoir, so this is due for a flush. The engine oil is also at the maximum fill level and is currently a medium brown color and appears to have recently been changed. The power steering fluid is far below the recommended fill line and is showing a dark brown color, so this is due for a flush and refill as well. When filling this system, Dextron automatic transmission fluid should be used instead of conventional power steering fluid, and it should present with a bright red coloring when clean. You can either go by the fill line marked inside the reservoir or the first line on the dipstick attached to the cap. Finally, the washer fluid reservoir has plenty of fluid and I'm not seeing any debris in the tank. As for fluid leaks, things are looking pretty good. I'm not seeing any leaks from above and everything is mostly clean and dry. Below the car, there's a small amount of seepage on the power steering pump and the front of the steering rack, but nothing excessive and there aren't any active drops forming. Coming back to our stumbling idle at cold start, I'm not seeing any obvious vacuum leaks. The split intake boot is before the airflow meter, so it's letting in unfiltered air but not unmetered air. I also wanted to check the throttle position switch and the DME temperature sensor. The throttle body is located at the rear of the intake manifold, with the throttle position switch at the base of the assembly. When it's properly adjusted, you should hear a clicking sound when the throttle is opened, and in this case it appears to be adjusted correctly, which is a good sign. Next, we can perform some resistance tests on the wiring harness connector for the DME computer down in the passenger footwell. On this 944S model, we'll be testing pin 52 for the TPS idle contact switch, and pin 45 for the temperature sensor. Starting with the TPS, with one lead of the ohm meter connected to a grounding point and the other lead applied to pin 52, we should see a reading of about 0 ohms, which checks out here. When the accelerator is depressed, the reading should change to infinite ohms, so this is working correctly. Next, we can apply the lead to pin 45 for the temperature sensor, and here we're looking for about 3,300 ohms at 59 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1,400 ohms at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. It's currently 67 degrees in the garage, and the sensor is reading about 3,200 ohms, which is within specification, so we can check both of these off the list. Before we move inside the car, there are a few other mechanical items we can inspect around the outside, and one of those is the brake system. Here we can see someone has painted the brake calipers in black, and they look nice and clean with some fresh hardware installed. These floating calipers tend to get rusty and locked up over time, so this is a nice addition to the car. The brake pads at the front and rear also have plenty of life left in them, and the rotors are a little oxidized from sitting, but they're otherwise in good shape with no deep grooves in the surfaces. Around the back of the car, the CV axle boots are in good shape, but it looks like the axle grease could be refreshed as some of it has leaked out. When checking out the rear suspension, you'll typically notice that one corner of the car has dipped lower than the other, indicating the shocks are worn out, and here the car is sitting even on both sides. The front shocks can be tested by pushing down on the front end. With a set of new dampers, the front end should pop back up and settle right in without bouncing. These front shocks can be depressed fairly easily, and there's a little bit of bounce before they settle in, so they're showing some age. Moving on to the interior, I'm not going to spend a lot of time breaking everything down here, but the big things to look out for are the dashboard and the front leather seats, as they're high-dollar items that tend to show the most wear as these cars age. This particular car has one of the nicest dashboards I've seen recently, with only slight warpage around the center defrost vents, but not a single crack anywhere in the material. The left driver's seat bolster is fading with normal use, and the seat bottoms are a little weathered on both sides with some broken stitching. At one point in its past, this car was the victim of a low-level flooding event, where water reportedly came up to the lower seat sections inside, and you can see that the seat rails are a little oxidized as a result. Under the passenger footwell, there's also some evidence of where water had poured down from the rusty battery tray. Most of the other materials are in good condition, however. There are a few aftermarket modifications here as well, with a Momo steering wheel installed, some Lloyd mats with a Porsche script, and simulated carbon fiber overlays on the dashboard trim and center console. Power window and sunroof issues are also common on these cars, but all those are working correctly in this case. I've found that the left door pull is missing a few screws, the front windshield wipers don't function, the digital clock illuminates but you can't adjust the time, and there's one slider button missing from the HVAC low air distribution control. The heat works, but the AC compressor clutch fails to engage when the switch is depressed. I did notice some charge port adapters in the engine compartment where someone has converted the system to R134A, so it's likely low in refrigerant. Overall, though, this is a really nice low-mile interior. Out on the road test, we're looking for things like steering feel, brake pedal and clutch pedal feel, gear selection and transmission issues, acceleration response, and any strange noises or vibrations. Overall, the throttle response is very good, there's no hesitation, and the acceleration curve is strong and linear without any stumbling. The shift lever action is smooth and precise, there's no excessive play or resistance from changing gears. The steering feels tight with no side-to-side play, and the car's not pulling to one side or the other, so the alignment feels good. There's a small amount of body roll when turning aggressively, again going back to those shocks that are showing some age. The clutch pedal feels smooth and linear, and it engages at the midpoint, so no issues there. And the brake pedal feels normal for a 944, nice and firm. The tires feel a little bit hard, as we saw with the date codes, they're starting to harden a bit, and there's some minor flat spots from sitting, but otherwise fine. The odometer is ticking over as expected, which is great to see, but the cruise control is failing to engage, where the accelerate function is self-canceling after a few seconds. I finally got the cruise control to engage after about 6 attempts. Given the irregular switch response, it's likely the cruise control computer needs to be replaced, as they're prone to crack solder joints. As for noises inside the cabin, there are a few normal squeaks and rattles over rough surfaces, but I didn't observe any strange sounds from the brakes, the wheel bearings, CV axles, or the exhaust. Overall, the car drives really well, and it would just benefit from some new shocks and tires down the road. Well, that concludes the post-purchase inspection on this 1987 Porsche 944S. Again, whether you're a potential buyer or a current 944 owner, this should give you an idea of some things to look for when assessing a car's overall condition.